Today we discuss three teams who are in the playoff hunt but may not be favorites to make it. How will they handle the trade deadline? What is the best path for each team? We've got all that and more next on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Flames, Jess Belmosto. And Jess, a little disappointing end to the last few games before the Four Nations break. Is Dustin Wolf getting a little tired? Is that part of the problem, do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that has a lot to do with it. He hasn't obviously played at the NHL level before to this extent. And they have been riding him hard, and I don't want to say taking advantage of him because that's absurd. He's doing his job, but they're pushing him, and that's the only way you're going to get better and figure out, what is the threshold. And he has historically played better at home this season, and unfortunately it just kind of did not play out that way over these last few games. And it's a long season. He's young. He has horrendous defense in front of him. So he has to do a lot of the work. And it's not easy.
No, it is not. Any other things that you think contributed to the losing streak right before Four Nations?
Gosh, I think the lack of scoring obviously plays a big part of that. But the defense is it's not good. They had Joel Hanley, who is a 6th or 7th defenseman, playing on the top pairing with Rasmus Andersson. Not great. Miramonov, who was typically played with Uyghur, is not a top 4 pairing defenseman, and they are just trying to plug holes, and it's not working.
Yeah, no, never easy, especially at this point in the season, to try to have guys step up a couple of notches above where they usually play. Now, the Flames did pull off a big trade with Philadelphia recently. How are the new guys doing since their acquisition? How are they fitting in, and are they meeting expectations in this small sample size?
Yeah, I think that for the amount of games they've played in the short 10 days it's been, they've adjusted pretty well. Morgan Frost had a goal last night against the Kraken, and Farabee had the assist on that. They've both obviously scored. I think it's going well. Ryan Huska is not known for keeping lines together very long. So, I think it's a great way for them to try to build chemistry, but at the same time, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to see what truly works and what doesn't work if you're always in a blender.
Do these two players, do you think Frost and Farabee help? The Flames are near the bottom in goals scored in the league. Is this an attempt, in your opinion, to boost that number?
Yes, I would have to say so. I think both of them really needed the change of scenery based on what I've read and people I've talked to in the Philadelphia scene. So I think that, it's definitely beneficial for them in that aspect. And I don't want to say they've gotten off to a red hot start, but they haven't really missed a beat since arriving. And I think that that's, a great thing for them, but also the team that is dead last at even strength scoring. So
Who do you think benefits most from these acquisitions?
In terms of like the Flames versus the Flyers, or
Well, in terms of which Flames players do you think
which
will benefit
okay.
from the trade?
I think really any of the middle six players, I think will definitely um see. I think Backlund needs to take a step back a little bit, let some young blood in. 36 years old, time to kind of, get some fresh legs out there and have someone younger like Morgan Frost come in and step in at center. And he has a lot of great players to learn from, like Backlund, like Kadri. And I think, having a great winger as well for, when Connor Zary comes back from injury, I think will definitely be great. And Joel Farabee.
Trade deadline is now less than a month away. Already, the big trade with Philly. You think the Flames are done yet? And how do you think they're going to approach the trade deadline? Because they're still right in contention, but are they expected to make the playoffs? Is that part of the, how desperate are they to make the postseason?
I really think that they are going to try to execute squeaking in to the playoffs. However, I think that this 6-game road trip they have right after the Four Nations break, that's make or break time for them. I think that is the point where this season is going to either go in the direction of, hey, we're making that playoff run, or okay, we're heading back in the direction where we should have been all season long, bottom of the barrel. I think they could potentially make some trades. I don't necessarily think they're going to be needle movers for this immediate effect. I don't think that it's a, hey, like we're going after this immediate impact guy. But it could be a player like Morgan Geekie, 26-year-old center, who is an RFA, I believe, at the end of this season. So he, could potentially have some team control there. His wife's from Calgary, so that could be, a little incentive to sign or to stay, whatever the case may be. But I think ultimately it's going to depend on who's available and at what cost.
So, I mean, I would assume offense is still a primary need. Like, you say it's not going to be like a big needle mover. So, what type you're talking about? A middle six kind of a forward?
Yeah, more of what they already have. That unfortunately seems to be the approach for the Flames. But I think that, it's going to be a middle six or someone they think they can push to the top six.
And if, let's say, over this 6-game road trip, they go, they struggle and they don't do well, who might become available, or do they just stand pat?
I don't think they're moving anyone. I think it would make sense to move Rasmus Anderson from a draft capital perspective, and I don't think you want to lock him up necessarily long term, but Craig Conroy is steering this ship, so who knows? But I think that if they do move anyone, it's going to likely be, the Jake Beans, the Joel Hanleys, maybe Braden Pahal. It just it'll be a depth move for whoever's trading for them.
So what do you think this team should do as of right now?
Go on a losing streak. It does not make sense especially after the way they lost the game against the Kraken, just late in the third period, just having it completely unravel in front of them. This team is not currently built for the playoffs. They don't have the consistent scoring. They don't have someone that you can count on to really break open a game. And Connor Zary and Matt Coronado are probably about as close as you're getting to that at the moment. And no disrespect to them, they're still young. You can't put all of your eggs in one basket with that, especially first year in a rebuild, retool, transitional period. I think that they need to keep working, drafting that high-end talent or figuring out ways to acquire that high-end talent.
Well, we will see what they do. It's going to be an interesting next month or so. Jess, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find Locked On Flames wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, as well as YouTube. Just search Locked On Flames. And you can follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Jess Belmosto.
All right, Jess, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you could place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. And Hunter, it's been a roller coaster ride for this Penguins team. 1 minute they look great, 1 minute they look inept, and often they're somewhere in the middle. The last couple of games, no Sidney Crosby. Talk to me about his status, his health, and what's going on with Sid.
Yeah, so it appeared that Crosby injured his shoulder/arm area in that game against the Devils. He was really favoring it coming off the ice. He was able to return during the third period, also play in overtime. You could tell it was hampering him a bit, but still wasn't enough to keep him out of the game. He really wanted to finish off that game and try to help the Penguins win that one. They ended up losing in the shootout, which has been the case all season. This team is the worst shootout team in the league. It doesn't matter if anything happens. They are just that bad in shootouts. But then misses practice. Sullivan says, yeah, he's dealing with an upper body injury. He then comes out, skates the next day. He practices a little bit, but then goes off to skate on his own. Next day, skates a little bit more. And then heading into that game against Flyers, he did even more during that early portion of the day, but still didn't play. So he sat out these last two games. And fans understand that Sid is trying to protect himself for the Four Nations face-off. And I know there's some fans out there who don't really care about the Four Nations face-off. I get it. It's kind of an advertisement for the NHL. I see it as like an appetizer for next year with the Olympics. But Sidney Crosby is someone who very much cares about this. He takes being the captain of Team Canada very seriously. He hasn't done it on a stage this big in almost a decade at this point. So he wants to go out there and play and try to win this event for Canada before playing in the Olympics, because these next two things are probably two of the last things he'll do as a member of Team Canada, because after that with the Olympics, after 26, you have 2030 is the next Olympics, and I don't think he's probably going to be playing at that point. Maybe he plays the World Cup of Hockey in 2028, but still, this is probably the last time he's going to be the captain of Team Canada at this and at the next Olympics. So he wants to go out with a bang on this. I totally get why he's protecting himself, but the fact that he's already skating, doing enough stick work, I think he's going to be fine for the Four Nations face-off. I think he's going to play at some point during the event. If it's the first game, we'll have to see. But I still think he's going to play the majority of this event, and he'll be back for the Penguins after the break.
And obviously, for the Penguins, that's the most important thing, that he's back after the break.
Absolutely, yeah. I really want him to hit that point per game record this year. That's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to this year, because obviously they're not going to make the playoffs this year. They might get a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft, depending on where they finish. But in terms of, success for this year, I just want to see him hit that point per game record. Like, that's the biggest thing for me. That's what he's chasing down. I know he wants to try and get this team back to the playoffs this year, but right now, just don't think that's in the cards. But I still think he is going to be fully ready by the time the NHL comes back from this break, as will Evgeny Malkin and as will Brian Rust.
Tristan Jarry, he's been let go. He's been sent down. He's back. Talk to me about where he's at and where the goaltending is at, because goals against remain the biggest problem for this Penguins team.
Well, Gil, I wouldn't say he's back. I feel like this right now is more of a paper move because Yoel Blomqvist and some of the other AHL players that were up during this week, Wilkes-Barre just had their AHL break. So they're still playing AHL games. They're being sent down to get more games in during this 2-week break. So Jari really is not going to get any game action by being up with the Penguins. I would actually expect Jari to be sent down after this 2-week break to get more games in Wilkes-Barre, and then they'll bring Blomqvist back up to back up Nedeljkovic. I wanted to see more of Blomqvist during this little stretch here, but it just so happened that Alex Nedeljkovic really went on a heater before the break here, Gil. In 7 of his 8 starts, he was .905 or better. In 6 of those starts, he was .926 or better, save percentage-wise. Like, this is the best stretch of play I've seen him play in a really long time. He's definitely boosting his trade value if the Penguins want to go down that road. Obviously, I know they'd rather deal Jari compared to Nedeljkovic, but Ned is still playing fairly well these last few weeks. It's a nice change of pace after the way he started the first half of the season where he couldn't make a save at all, but the same thing was going for Jari. So I really don't read too much into it. I know a lot of fans are freaking out, but I expect Jari to go back down after this break and for Blomqvist to come back up. We'll have to see how many starts he gets, but Ned, he's playing very well right now.
And would he have to clear waivers again if they send him back down?
No, he can just be sent back down. He went through waivers. He'll be sent back down. It won't be a problem.
Got it. So you said that it looks unlikely that the Penguins make the playoffs this year. They're not that far out, although there are a lot of teams in the hunt. What do you expect this team to do at the trade deadline?
Well, it's going to be more of the same. You just saw them trade Marcus Pettersson, Andrew O'Connor to the Vancouver Canucks. I felt like they got a very nice package in return for those two players. You know, Danton Heinen, he's been fine. He missed a beautiful chance. I don't know. I just almost said glorified, but a beautiful chance against the Flyers on Saturday. Looked to the heavens after he basically missed a wide open net. Couldn't believe that. You know, Vinny Desharnais, he's playing totally fine. I know he wasn't having a good year in Vancouver. His underlying numbers weren't good. Wasn't passing the eye test. So far, he's been totally fine. You know, he's clearing the front of the net pretty well. He's moving the puck out of his own zone pretty well, making the right timed pinches. I think he's been totally fine in a bottom pairing role. They're going to keep playing him and see what he can do in that role. The big thing, though, is the first round pick, because I think they might flip that for immediate help and go try and go get a younger player that can help not just now, but well into the future. But as for the plan, Gil, Matt Grzelcyk, I would expect him traded. Anthony Beauvillier, former Islander, of course, I would expect him to get dealt. He's had a fine bounce back this year. If you can get a mid-round pick for him, I'll be totally fine with that. They'll listen on someone like Rickard Rakell. I'm sure there's a lot of teams interested in him, and rightfully so. 25 goals this season. His bounce back has been so fun to watch, but I only trade him if you really get a massive haul. And I'm talking a first and a prospect, first and a player, something like that. But it has to start with a first round pick. If you want to trade him, you need to sell extremely high. Now, granted, I'm not sure the Penguins are going to trade him because I'm not sure they're going to get that offer. And you have to consider, if they do trade him, I think Sidney Crosby is going to be fairly upset because he and Rakell have really good chemistry this year. You got to give Crosby a couple of good line mates. He obviously has Brian Rose, who's having a great year, but Rakell is having an even better year. And that'll be 2 seasons in a row of, you know, the front office taking away Sidney Crosby's best winger because they traded Jake Guentzel last year. So they'll listen on that. Michael Bunting, they'll listen on him. Erik Karlsson, that's more of a summer move if they decide to go down that path. But you're going to still see more players be sold off. Grzelcyk, Beauvillier, maybe they'll listen on someone like Matt Nieto, who's, you know, bottom 6 forward. Nolan Chari, same thing. You know, we'll just have to see. But I would expect more trades.
And what would they be looking for in return? I mean, scoring depth is obviously an issue.
Right. I mean, I think with this, since they're building toward the future, they want younger players first. But if they can't get that, I mean, you're not going to get a younger player for someone like Beauvillier or Grzelcyk. It's probably going to be like a mid-round draft pick or something. So they're probably going to have to stick with that. But if they decide to make a bigger move, like I said, Rakell, you're looking at a first plus a younger player, something along those lines. So I think in their order of priorities, you know, it's younger players, draft picks, and then, you know, some veteran players coming back that can at least eat some minutes every night. At least that's, I think, their order of preference. But they're going to be busy around the deadline, and I would expect a very active summer as well.
Yeah, and talking about that summer, I mean, if assuming Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin are back next year, and by all, we all expect that to be the case. What are they looking to do? Because obviously they want to get another playoff opportunity for these guys, but how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, it's all about getting younger. Like, they're trying to really turn over this roster and bring in more younger players that can really try and usher in this new generation of Penguins hockey. Like, they're basically rebuilding the team, but with the core players still on it. When I talk core players, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, if they want to trade Carlson, I think this is the summer to do it, especially with the salary cap going up. But again, they're rebuilding the team while keeping the big three on the team. Because again, the only way those three leave is if they go to management or ownership and be like, okay, we're out of here. Like, we don't want to be here. We're requesting trades. That's the only way they leave. They have not done that yet, and I don't expect them to do that. So for as long as that's the case, they're going to remain here while they try and flip the other portions of the roster to younger players. So, does that mean with how many draft picks they've amassed, are they going to offer sheet up an RFA this offseason? I can 100% see that. Are they going to, move up some of these draft picks for some of these players that could be available? I can 100% see that. Again, they got that extra first round pick that's top 13 protected. I think they're going to flip that pick, and they're going to try to go get a younger player who can be here not just for a couple years, but for the long haul. Like, that's the type of player that Kyle Dubas really wants to go after to try and improve this team going forward.
All right, Hunter, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can follow the Locked On Penguins podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, all that stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodies, and you can follow my co-host Patrick Damp on all social media platforms at Syndrome for Wet. We'll have another episode for you all on Monday, breaking down these two games, hopefully with Jesse Marshall of The Athletic for Marshall Monday.
All right, thanks, Hunter.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts the post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need to hire like yesterday. The pressure is on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly where Indeed Sponsored Jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Montreal Canadiens, Laura Saba. And Laura, the Habs not exactly hitting on all cylinders as we enter the break. It's been a roller coaster ride all season. They win 4 in a row. They lose 3 in a row. Why has this team been slumping lately?
So, we want to joke around and say that it's been downhill since Emil Heineman got hit by a car in Salt Lake City. But there are a lot of things that are going wrong. I think one of the big things is that teams figured them out. And specifically what happened when they first started on that surge was they got a lot of confidence from Patrick Laine being on the power play. He scored, I think it was 8 of his first goals in on the power play as a Montreal Canadien. If I'm not mistaken, I'm sure our listeners will keep me honest. But people figured it out, right? It was, that was predictable. So that was one thing. They also, I think they're a young team. So that 60-minute effort, we aren't seeing it as often as we would like. I think defensively, they aren't doing that great. They aren't doing as badly as they were in the beginning of the season. Maybe after the first month, I would have said it was the defense that was a problem. But right now what's happening is that they had 4 lines that were going well. The second line was sort of, it was on the verge of getting going, but the other lines were definitely working and clicking. And right now you're not seeing that. You're seeing, and part of it has to be like the Canadians have to do some line shuffling due to the absence of Emil Heineman. But part of it too is that the first line isn't getting anything going. The second line has been terrible some nights, so Marty has had to do a lot of line blending. But the things that were clicking before aren't. And it sort of is also a situation where everything that can go wrong at the wrong time is happening. Whereas before, during that surge, everything that could go right at the right time was happening, right? They were getting the bounces, they were playing well. And the last two games that were against New Jersey and Tampa at the Bell Center, the Canadiens actually played really well. They couldn't get offense going against New Jersey. But if you look at the underlying numbers, it was really good. And you saw them come out with effort, right? The effort is always there. And then against Tampa, the underlying numbers, Montreal was extremely dominant versus Tampa. They just, a couple of mistakes or, a goal that shouldn't have gone in or, that kind of thing. So the last two games, I would say, I'm not as upset about as I would be for the previous 8 or 9. The thing is, though, like, I think it's a little bit too late. I don't think you can say that the Canadiens are going to be in the mix anymore when we come back from the Four Nations break.
So playoffs or no playoffs, how do you get this team back on track, back to where they want to be for the rest of this season?
So, one thing that I said on our show and on a different podcast is that they have time to reset, right? And the things that aren't working are sometimes fundamentals. Like that the power play is terrible. Like it's not generating anything. It's not the worst in the league by any means. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that the problems that plague it are that it's not creative and it's not dynamic, right? So they need to work on that. They keep talking about how they don't have time to practice it. Well, when they come back, there's going to be a few practices before they start playing against Ottawa on their return. So they have to do that. And then there's some fundamentals, right? A lot of people are playing through stuff. Josh Anderson notably has taken a therapy day for every practice, but he's still playing really well by Josh Anderson's standards. They need to get it together. Some rest is going to be in order. We're trying to figure out now what happens with the Caden Gooley hole in the lineup. Logan Mailloux was brought up. They don't offer the same things. So Logan Mailloux is now currently back down in Laval to help them with their playoff push. But I think the biggest thing that they have to do is they have to get back to basics. They have to, their passing is terrible. Their positional awareness is terrible. And all of those things were good during that 1.5 to 2 months where the Canadiens were surging. Like, that they can do it. We've seen it happen. We've seen it be successful. It's just that they seem to have forgotten how to do that. So some rest is in order, break is in order. Some fresh ideas from Marty would be really helpful, particularly with respect to the special teams. Some discipline. The Canadiens' discipline is awful. It's not the worst, again, by any means, but any bad team, any team when they're playing and it's the inferior team, that the officials are going to call more against that particular team. So the Canadiens, knowing this, that night in and night out, they're probably playing against teams that are better than them. They really need to be disciplined, and they're not doing that. I would not in any respect call them lazy in any way. The effort is there. They just seem to be more scrambling, more behind the play, all of that. They're kind of forgetting when things were going right. Each player also knew their role correctly. And now they're trying to do things again that aren't suited to their own roles. Like, they're not fitting in the way that they were previously. So to me, it's a lot of just like a mental reset, emotional reset, some practices, some fresh ideas for Marty. And also, the Canadiens are now sellers. And so with every trade, it's going to be more and more of a wake-up call that, this team was almost in the mix and now they're back to being sellers at the deadline. So
you mentioned they will likely be sellers at the deadline. Who do you think they make available, and what are they looking for in return?
So earlier today, on the day that we're recording this, Pierre LeBrun talked about how the Montreal Canadiens and Jake Evans are not close on a contract. And then it seemed from the Canadiens media and the quotes that were coming out that the way he was talking about, it's been an honor to be a Montreal Canadian. It seems like, the writing's kind of on the wall on that. I will say he is currently their biggest trade piece because Jake Evans has had a stellar year, a fantastic year. He has sometimes, on some nights, been the only bright spot other than Lane Hudson. And these are two very different caliber players, right? Like, Lane Hudson has superstar potential. Jake Evans is always going to be bottom six. So, he's had a phenomenal year. And he's the kind of guy that you win playoff, you win championships with. He's like, when Washington added Lars Eller, for example. Like, he's that quintessential guy. So I think he's going to be the biggest trade piece for the Montreal Canadiens, but I wouldn't sleep on Yoel Armia, who also, has had a couple years. He put together a couple of years back to back that were really good. Who would be available is also David Savard for sure. I don't think he ever wants to leave Montreal. I think, and then Christian Dvorak, which I don't necessarily know anyone's going to call about Christian Dvorak. Like I don't see it, but I see a team calling about David Savard because he is that shot blocking guy. Again, he's like that cliche guy that you win in the playoffs with. Like he's going to throw his body on the line to block whatever puck. He's going to save that like one Stanley Cup winning goal or whatever. So those are really the big three for me. And I do think that the Montreal Canadiens do have an opportunity as well to look at acquiring some more prospects. I don't think anymore they're looking for picks. I think they're looking for prospects at this point. And then in the summer, they're going to look for immediate help, like roster players, whether it's on, draft weekend. They're not going to get together. It's decentralized now, but that's usually when deals happen, right? So whether it's draft weekend or whether it is free agency or whether it is, through a trade, they're going to acquire immediate help. Like next year's the year that Ivan Demidov is set to come to Montreal. And next year they have to make the playoffs. Otherwise they're stuck in a perpetual rebuild scenario, just like Buffalo. And you want to avoid Buffalo, is what you want to do. So I think, anyone, if you're a GM, you have to be calling Kent Hughes right now, whatever it is you're looking for, because there are deals to be made. And if you're a GM of a team that's poised to make the playoffs, like Jake Evans is a prize. And the thing that the advantage the Canadiens have is that there's a lot of teams that are still in the mix that the Montreal Canadiens have fallen out of, right? So I don't see the Islanders selling. I don't see, Columbus selling. I don't see Ottawa or Detroit selling. I see them trying to make the playoffs, and the Rangers are not going to be selling, whether it's because they are too good and they're just slumping, like in terms of a roster, or they're just too, like, their ego, right? So I don't, so I see that the Montreal Canadiens are the store right now. They're the shop, open for business. So, I think Kent Hughes is going to be busy for the next few weeks.
It's going to be an interesting ride for sure. Laura, why don't you tell us where you could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
So we are we are Locked On Canadiens everywhere. We're no longer posting on X. We are no longer, so myself and my co-host, you can't find us there, or we're not tweeting. You'll find us on Blue Sky. You'll find us on TikTok. You'll find us on Instagram. You'll find us on Gmail, and all of those places I just listed, it's Locked On Canadiens. And you'll find us if you want to listen to us on YouTube and wherever you want to listen, wherever you listen to your podcast. So Locked On Canadiens, it is.
All right, Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from our hosts, Steele and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guest, Jess Belmosto of Locked On Flames, Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins, and Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we're here every day, Monday through Saturday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the NHL and the world of women's hockey. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, thank you so much for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.